Text 29. Apane juvati pranam prane panam tata pare prana pana khati rudva prana yama parayana apare niyatahara pranan praneshu juvati. Apane, in the air which acts downward, juvati, offer, pranam, the air which acts outward, prane, in the air going outward, apanam, the air going downward, tata, as also, apare, others, prana, of the air going outward, apana, and the air going downward, gati, the movement, rudva, checking, pranayama, trance induced by stopping all breathing, parayana, so inclined, apare, others, niyata, having control, ahara, eating, pranan, the outgoing air, praneshu, in the outgoing air, juvati, sacrifice. Translation. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the ongoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing. Thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing, others curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Purport. This system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama, and in the beginning it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. All these processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual realization. This practice involves controlling the airs within the body so as to reverse the directions of their passage. The apana air goes downward and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices the breathing the opposite way until currents are neutralized into puraka equilibrium. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called rechaka. When both airs or currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in Kumbhaka Yoga. By practice of Kumbhaka Yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection in spiritual realization. The intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life without waiting for the next. For by practicing Kumbhaka Yoga, the yogis increase the duration of life by many years. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. These senses, being always engaged in the service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So at the end of life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 14.26. Mam chayavya vicharena bhakti yogena sevate saguna sabatirtheta brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in unallowed devotional service to the Lord transcends the modes of material nature and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. A Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage and is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna Prasadam or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control, and without sense control there is no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. Text 30. Sarve piyete yagya vido yagya kshapita kalmasha yagya shishtamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. Sarve are all, api, although apparently different. Ete, these, yagya vida, conversant with the purpose of performing sacrifices. Yagya kshapita, being cleansed as the result of such performances. Kalmasha, of sinful reactions. Yagya shishta, of the result of such performances of yagya. Amrita bhuja, those who have tasted such nectar. Yanti, do approach. Brahma, the supreme, Sanatanam, eternal atmosphere. Translation. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices. They advance toward the supreme eternal atmosphere. Purport. From the foregoing explanation of different types of sacrifice, namely the sacrifice of one's position, study of the Vedas or philosophical doctrines, and the performance of the yoga system, it is found that the common aim of all is to control the senses. Sense gratification is the root cause of material existence. Therefore, unless and until one is situated on a platform apart from sense gratification, there is no chance of being elevated to the eternal platform of full knowledge, full bliss, and full life. This platform is in the eternal atmosphere or Brahman atmosphere. All the above mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of the material existence. By this advancement in life, not only does one become happy and opulent in this life, but also at the end he enters into the eternal kingdom of God, either emerging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Text 31. Na ayam lokosya ayagnasya kutonya kurusattama. Na, never. I am this loka planet. Asti, there is ayagnasya, for one who performed no sacrifice. Kuta, where is anya, the other. Kurusattama, O best among the Kurus. Translation: O best of the Kuru dynasty. Without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? Purport: whatever form of material existence one is in, one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. In other words, existence in the material world is due to the multiple reactions of our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's dragging on in material existence. The human form of life is the only loophole by which one may get out of this entanglement, and the Vedas therefore give us chance for escape by pointing out the paths of religion, economic comfort, regulated sense gratification, and at last the means to get out of the miserable condition entirely. The path of religion or the different kinds of sacrifice recommended above automatically solves our economic problems. By performance of yajna, we can have enough food, enough milk, etc. Even if there is a so-called increase of population, when the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. The Vedas prescribe therefore sacred marriage for regulated sense gratification. Thereby one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from material bondage, and the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna sacrifice as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to the Vedas, how can he expect a happy life even in this body, and what to speak of another body on another planet? The different grades of material comforts in different heavenly planets, and on all cases there is immense happiness for persons engaged in different kinds of yajna. But the highest kind of happiness that a man can achieve is to be promoted to the spiritual planets by the practice of Krishna consciousness. A life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all the problems of material existence. Text 32. Evam bahuvida yajna vidata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidditan sarvan evam jnatma vimokshase. Evam, thus bahuvida, various kinds of yajna sacrifices, vidata or spread, brahmana of Vedas, mukhe through the mouth, karmajan born of work, viddi you should know, tan them, sarvan all, evam thus jnatva knowing, vimokshase you will be liberated. All these different types of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. Purport: different types of sacrifice as discussed above are mentioned in the Vedas to suit different types of workers. Such, because men are so deeply absorbed in the bodily concept, these sacrifices are so arranged that one can either work with the body, with the mind, or with the intelligence, but all of them are recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. This is confirmed by the Lord herewith from his own mouth. Text 33. Text: Shreyan dravyamaya yajna jnana yajna parantapa sarvan karma kilam partha jnane parisamapyate. Shreyan, greater, pravyamayat, of the material possessions, yajna, then the sacrifice, jnana yajna, sacrifice in knowledge, parantapa, or chastise the enemy, sarva, all karma activities, akilam, in totality, partha, O son of Pritha, jnane, in knowledge, parisamapyate, and O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Purport: the purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, and then to release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice. One should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer, and when one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, The performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than who simply sacrifices material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without elevation of the knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on the differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruitive activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge. Text 33. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. That knowledge of different sacrifices, Vidhi try to understand, pranipatena by approaching a spiritual master, pariprashnena by submissive inquiry, sevaya by the rendering of service, upadekshanti they will initiate te to you, jnanam into knowledge, jnanina the self-realized tattva of the truth, darshana seers. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Purport: the path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be a spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmamsu Sakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help one lead to the right path. Nor by independent study of the books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and upset inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries become perfect. Text 35. Yajnatvana punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutana sheshani rakshasi atmani ato mai. Yet which gnatva, knowing none ever punah again moham to illusion evam like this yasyasi you shall go pandava, O son of Pandu. Yena, by which bhutani, living entities, asheshani, all rakshasi you will see atmani in the supreme soul, ata who, or in other words, mai in me. Translation: having obtained real knowledge from your self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. The result of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called Maya. Maya, ma, not, this. Something that we have nothing to do with Krishna, that Krishna is only a great historical personality, and that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna. Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of everything. In the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experience in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its own original identity. But Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that Absolute means that 1 plus 1 is equal to 1 and 1 minus 1 is equal to 1. This is the case in the Absolute world. For want of sufficient knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion, and therefore we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless not different from him. The bodily difference of the living entities is Maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By Maya alone, Arjuna thought that the temporary bodily relationship with his kinsman was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted toward this end, that a living being as Krishna's eternal servitor cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being an identity apart from Krishna is called Maya. The living entities as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul, Krishna, is the supreme shelter for all living entities, and giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate identity. Thus, under the different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, it is to be understood that they are on the path of liberation, as confirmed in the Bhagavatam 2.10.6. Muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna consciousness.